Greetings, friends. My name is Dr. Rebecca Lee McCarthy, and today we will be looking at the concept of utilitarianism. Utilitarianism is a philosophy that was first brought forth by Jeremy Bentham, born in February 1748, and he died in June of 1832. Bentham believed that a moral act was one that did not cause harm to others and worked to increase happiness or utility. Bentham was influenced by several other important thinkers of his time, including David Hume, John Gay, and Richard Cumberland. John Stuart Mill, born in 1806 and died in 1873, was extremely inspired by Bentham and the utilitarian philosophy. He worked to refine this philosophy during his lifetime. Utilitarianism is a form of consequential reasoning, which means we weigh the consequences of our actions before we act. The main goal is to make sure our decisions and our acts maximizes the happiness for the greatest number of people involved. Utilitarianism is a group ethic, meaning the main goal is to help the group rather than simply the individual. Typically, we divide utilitarianism into two types, act and rule. Act utilitarianism simply means that we consider each act individually. The idea is this: no two situations are the same, so we need to look at each situation with new eyes, considering all the potential consequences before we take an action. Rule utilitarianism suggests otherwise. There is a feeling that some situations might be like enough that we can make a generalized rule to cover all these different types of situations. An example is the seatbelt law. It was realized that thousands of lives could be saved if people simply used their seatbelts while driving their cars. To maximize the good for everyone, a rule, a law, was made requiring people to wear their seatbelts. This is an example of rule utilitarianism. Before making a decision about how to act, it is important to consider all the potential consequences of our actions and how these consequences will impact everyone involved, as well as elements such as the environment and the world we live in. We also should consider how our actions will impact these elements in a long term rather than a short term framework. You might be able to maximize people's happiness in the short term, but will it be sustained through the long term? For example, let's pretend I am running for President of the United States on the premise that I will give all citizens one slice of their favorite cake daily if elected. In the short-term view, I make tons of people happy by giving them something that brings delight and happiness. Yummy cake. In the long-term view, I am likely promoting health problems down the line, taking away from that initial happiness as millions of people develop diabetes or other diseases as a result of my initial promise. Another example might be the home loans offered at high rates requiring nothing down, given to home buyers before the 2007 market crash. From the short-term point of view, these loans maximized happiness as many people who might not have been able to purchase a house all of a sudden had the opportunity to have a home of his or her own. From a long-term point of view, this was a disaster and harmed happiness not only for many of these buyers who found that they could not pay back their loans and lost their houses, but also for the larger community in general. These actions did not produce long-term happiness. Thus, when we try to promote happiness, we should think about the long-term consequences of our actions rather than any short-term gains. There are many criticisms against utilitarianism. In general, although this philosophy aims to benefit everyone, it really is impossible to benefit everyone by our decision-making processes. That's why we end up attempting to benefit at least the majority of people involved, aka the greatest number. But then we have to ask ourselves this: does it mean it's okay to have a decision that offers bad consequences for a minority of people? This is what we call creating a cost-benefit analysis, that as long as we are satisfying the majority, the fact that the minority may suffer becomes the end justifying the means result. Some examples of this potential harm include slavery. How can we argue that early American slavery is ethical and justified because only a minority amount of people, the slaves, suffered for the greatest good of this nation? This would be a cost-benefit analysis of slavery, and most of us would argue that it is morally wrong to promote ethical reasoning in this way. But it's also important to remember that Jerry Bentham insisted that an act was moral as long as it did not cause harm to anyone and at the same time increased happiness for the greatest amount of people. At this point, I think it's important to point out that utilitarianism is really a we rather than a I philosophy. If you happen to be a Star Trek fan, you might have remembered the movie The Wrath of Khan. One of the major themes or morals of this particular movie was that of utilitarianism. Spock mentions to Kirk more than once that the needs of the many outweigh the needs of the few. This reflects a group morality rather than an individualist morality. In communication studies, we discuss the difference as the difference between collectivists versus individualists. Collectivists tend to think in terms of we, like utilitarians, and individualists tend to think in terms of I, or egoists. Individualists, egoists, often argue against utilitarianism and other group-focused ethics by saying there is no way we can make a decision without focusing on our own self-interest. Indeed, we can never truly get out of our own skin. Therefore, we can never truly make an unbiased decision for a group of people. Collectivists, such as those who practice utilitarianism, would argue the opposite. Although it is true that we cannot escape our self, it is faulty thinking that we stand alone. Rather, our self is created by a multitude of experiences, people, influences that all converge to make us who we are. We do not stand alone, but rather we stand with all these influences. Thus, we must honor not only the influences, but the people who surround us, as they too are influences. This logic is extended to not only people, but the earth, our environment, the solar system, animals, as well as our fellow human beings. We are a connected whole, and therefore we must maximize the good for that collective whole. And that is it. I hope you enjoyed this short presentation on utilitarianism. Please consider the following internet sources to help enhance your knowledge on this topic. Julia Driver's article on the history of utilitarianism from the Stanford Encyclopedia of Philosophy. Stephen Nathanson's article on Act and Rule Utilitarianism at the Internet Encyclopedia of Philosophy, or visit the utilitarian and philosopher Peter Singer at his website, and you can even follow him on Twitter or Facebook.